Hey, friendo, Steve here.
And Larson.
And welcome back to Going In Raw, the only pro wrestling podcast you need to be listening to right here at youtube.com/Steven Larson. Available wherever podcasts can be found. And of course, taped live at the Twitch at twitch.tv/Steve and Larson. Of course, this is the final episode of our Dark Side of the Ring Season 3 recaps and reviews. It's the last two episodes of Dark Side Season 3. Of course, we're talking about today XPW, the Rob Black fronted outfit that tried to fill the shoes of ECW once they went under and just sort of became ECW West Coast while they were still kind of around. And then, of course, the Steroid Trial of WWF and Vince McMahon, which concluded the season. An episode that you and I, both these episodes really were two of the episodes that really you and I were advocating for from early on when we first started reviewing Dark Sides of the Ring episodes. So yeah, I mean, we could just start, I guess, with XPW. This obviously holds a bit of a special place in our heart in a weird way. Here's what I don't want to do: glorify XPW or Rob Black. That being said, being present in the scene at that time makes this episode a little bit special to us.
Yeah, I haven't experienced some of the events talked about in this episode, and then living in Southern California during the time. I mean, I was watching this episode. My wife was sitting on the couch, and I can't recount how many times something happened. I was like, "Oh, I was there for that.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when that happened."
Yeah.
Even that at the end, they have that bit where the Messiah is doing that promo at a smaller event. I think it's one of the Epic Wrestling events. I'm looking through the crowd, and it's like, because we went to a show in Santa Clarita, he was on there, dropped the promo. And I was like,
I was doing the same thing. I rewound.
Is that the show we were at?
I rewound to see if that was the one we were at. Yeah, because I remember there was that one that we went to where, because I guess, I don't know if I had went to several. If was it you, me, and Evald? We went to a show and Messiah was there, and somebody in the crowd said, "Thumb him in the eye." And he got really pissed and started like trying to find out who said that.
Yeah.
Understandably so. The guy had his thumb taken off. So much of what happened in the XPW episode, we were hearing about like as it was happening. Like I remember,
or experiencing firsthand.
Obviously, they talked about the Supreme getting lit on fire incident. We were at that show. I think Evald went to the new Jack Vic Grimes show.
That
I
sounds
think he
right.
was there for that.
That sounds right.
And I think that was the final straw for him. To me, XPW, even at the young age of 20, whatever, even at that young age, I recognized ECW was special. This is a ripoff. It was a cynical ripoff of ECW. And even then, look, I understand that Paul Heyman was, by many accounts, a shady guy who sometimes wouldn't pay his people. But you always heard back then about how much of a motivator he was and how much people really liked to work with him. Rob Black was not that. Even though towards the end of the episode, plenty of the wrestlers said, or a couple of them were like, yeah, I wouldn't take it back. I would do it all over again because of the memories we made. Well, generally in life, you want to get philosophical about things, with exception of probably like war and stuff, abusive relationships maybe. The good times tend to win out when you look back on the past. Like I lived with you and Jeff back then, and half the time I hated you guys. But now when I look back on it, I remember the fun stuff, and any of the bad stuff I remember through the lens of comedy, it was kind of funny how silly we were because we're a bunch of immature kids living together. Mm-hmm. But you're going to have a lot of good memories. It is interesting that I do appreciate that a lot of the actual wrestlers from then, like I love that they brought on Chaos, Joey Munoz, I think his name is. Mm-hmm. Because he's a really great storyteller, and he was one of the better wrestlers back then. Yeah, they put over Supreme big time, obviously. Yes. And I thought William Welch. I thought the Messiah was a hell of a storyteller, and it was very interesting to hear his side of things.
Yeah, it was. It definitely was. And you know, the two kind of focal points of the episode was obviously the genesis of XPW, and they touched upon the Supreme incident then, but also they spent more time talking about XPW's invasion, if you will, of ECW. So that was another show we were at. It was the first, and I believe only, ECW pay-per-view on the West Coast. It was at the Olympic Auditorium, downtown LA. We were sitting opposite of where the XPW contingent were sitting ringside. Remember early on, I think it was you said, I think those are the XPW guys over there.
Because we were on the second level, I think.
Yeah, we were in the lower bowl. We weren't on the floor. We were in the lower bowl.
Yeah. So we had a good vantage point down.
Yeah, and so we saw the whole thing. And even then, watching that, I'm like, yeah, I guess a publicity stunt, but yeah, it's kind of a shitty thing to do, honestly.
At the time, it felt like even at that young age, it wasn't like, oh, cool, these porno wrestlers are gonna. Here, the thing for me was always this: I like porno just fine. When I was in my 20s, I probably liked it even more. I never wanted it to be combined with my wrestling. There was a time and place for the wrestling, a time and place for the pornography. And I was like, really good. Put that in there. There was something so cynical about the entire thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, like what XPW did is took the violence of ECW
and salaciousness
and turned it up a lot.
Yeah.
Without the creative ideas behind it,
the stories I always remember were just like vehicles for the shocking.
Exactly.
And yeah, there was none of like the character building, back then. It was just like brute, like shock.
It was the bare minimum to shock and to motivate matches, it felt like. And granted, after I saw Supreme get lit on fire after that show, I stopped paying attention to XPW, apart from just, okay, what have they done lately? In terms of shocking wrestling followers and fans.
Although I do kind of semi-remember the Messiah leaving to this astral plane to go to that was weird.
They showed that. It was like, okay, well, that's a way to handle his departure. But even that show where Supreme got lit on fire, I had a bad feeling when we got there, because it was the Sandman's debut in XPW, I believe. I know I've said this before, but they were selling autographed kendo sticks from the Sandman. So there was dozens of people in the stands with kendo sticks. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Like if this gets a little rowdy, this could go bad.
Yeah.
You could have people, going to town on each other with kendo sticks. A little fight breaks out or something.
Yeah, sure.
That's awful.
Yeah.
And even before the fire spot Supreme match, I had never seen firsthand light tubes being used at a bout. And so and they showed this clip in Dark Side where Chaos and Supreme are essentially lightsaber fighting with light tubes. And they show the shot of when they actually meet and they break. What they don't show you is there's a piece about that large that goes flying into the audience. Thankfully, it landed where no one was sitting.
Yeah.
But I remember as soon as that thing broke off, I was following with my eyes. It went to my left. And I was following that.
Yeah.
And this felt like as soon as I walked into that show, I had to be on guard.
Yeah.
I didn't know what was gonna happen. And that's not a feeling I want when I go to a wrestling show.
Yeah, I can understand why some people would be interested in that, because I agree with you. I remember going there and thinking to myself, this could, like, just looking at the setup, this could go off the rails really quickly. Like this could be bad. We need to know where the exits are.
And knowing some of the backstory of some of the events in there, I think we were at the time underselling how badly things could have gone. Where they forged insurance documents, built scaffolds that they told the venue the scaffolding to be used for one thing, but is used for something else.
That was I'll be honest, that was shocking, because it's like, yeah, you're in pornography, but you're a real company. Like you're a real company. Like you can't get the proper things together. You can't get your shit together enough to, like, it was so ramshackle. It was just an absolute mess. And then, the insurance bit, the bit where he says, we forged the insurance documents at this show. And I think was that the New Jack Vic Grimes?
Yeah, I believe it was the scaffolding show.
Like of
yeah.
all the shows to forge the insurance documents, like that one, that was nuts. Honestly, it was nuts that it was always nuts that Vic Grimes survived that.
Yeah.
I mean, it was absolutely nuts that he, fortunately hit the ropes and bounced back. I remember the first time I watched that probably on like a little Real Player screen or something, and just being horrified at what I was seeing. But yeah, no, it was interesting. And of course we were, I don't know, probably via SoCal Uncensored or something like that, found out about the Messiah attack. I know it was on TV and everything, but I remember hearing about it before it was ever on America's Most Wanted.
Oh, same. Yeah. I mean, one of the wrestling news sites we read back then, it got around pretty quick. In hearing about that. And I think it was roughly where that attack happened, was roughly the neck of the woods where we were living at the time.
It was, yeah.
Yeah. And it was like, oh wow, something like that happened. And that happened basically in our backyard. That's crazy.
Yeah. But no, I remember watching it like, cause it was on like, whatever. I don't know if it was on KCAL 9 or what station it was on. Well, I don't know.
I don't recall.
I don't think it was on public access, but maybe it was public access. I thought it was on like KCAL 9 or something like that, cause they were running ECW at the time. But yeah, no, it was crazy. I mean, some of the things that I didn't know, I don't remember. I mean, I'm sure maybe I read about it somewhere along the way, but I didn't know that Rob Black was actually talking with Paul Heyman prior to XPW about bringing ECW out.
Yeah, I did not know that either.
I had not heard that, and XPW was basically a way to get revenge of some sort on Paul Heyman. Like, hey, I don't need you, because Paul Heyman didn't need him because he got a TV deal. And he was like, well, I don't need you. I'm going to start my own thing. And if you come out here, we're already going to have a presence. And so ECW is going to be a non-factor because we're going to outdo you. Some of the stories,
which motivated the XPW invasion at the ECW.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that was an interesting. That's one thing I actually never had heard, was that their ring crew got beat up. I had not heard that. I had heard that there was some sort of scuffle, but I didn't know that the XPW stars that invaded were taken to like some other location, while their ring crew, who was there also, were taken to a separate place. And apparently, according to New Jack and a couple others, they all got the shit beaten out of them, as opposed to attacking their wrestlers, which was an interesting way of doing it.
And one thing the wrestlers they talked to noted was that Rob Black was supposed to be there.
Yeah.
And then wasn't.
Yeah. And that was kind of interesting about the manipulation that was alleged of Rob Black when the Messiah came to him and he was the champion. I remember the Messiah. The Messiah was like, there were characters there that I thought were pretty well put together. Like, I always liked the Messiah and the simplicity of that character, kind of a Jim Jones type guy, but he just sort of looked like a West Coast Tommy Dreamer, I guess. I always really liked the simplicity of that character. Supreme, obviously, the deathmatch guy, but at a certain point, Messiah was like, not into this anymore. I'm going to quit. And he says, okay, well, if you're going to quit, I'm going to quit. And the implication is all your friends are going to lose jobs because you decided to quit. And he said, that manipulation kept me around for a little while. And then, the stuff happened, the affair happened with Lizzie Borden. And then one thing led to another and he lost a thumb. The recounting of the thumb incident, man, that was pretty rough. He goes to open a door and didn't have a thumb. So he's just clawing at it. That was pretty rough to hear about. Obviously, I don't think we had ever heard like a firsthand recounting of that, but a lot of the details had gotten out. I mean, that was one of those things that I don't know that wasn't mentioned in the show, but I thought I remember reading that his idea was they were going after his front area. I thought that was I thought I read that somewhere, but then apparently it was just a fumbled, like they were just trying to, was in the episode, was the implication they were trying to kill him or just trying to rough him up?
I don't know per se.
It all seemed very clumsy.
It did. And seemingly, as the Messiah recounts it, he was sitting playing video games. His door open. He didn't think much of it. He saw the reflection of two men in his TV behind him. Yeah. And then he tried to fight them off best he could. Eventually they pinned him down and they had a pair of clippers. So they were looking to clip something.
Yeah.
and they took his thumb. And if I remember correctly, he managed to fight them off. Essentially, he fought them off till they got so exhausted they left.
Yes. Yeah, they got gassed.
It was the story that the Messiah told. So, there's nothing in how he recounted it illuminated what their ultimate goal was. Was it just to take a thumb, a finger, something else worse? We don't know. He lost the thumb, which sucks, but
no kidding.
He made it out alive. So
yeah, and he passed out. I mean, God, if he had passed out before they had left, like that could have been even worse, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that was, I was kind of, I wasn't surprised that Rob Black wasn't interviewed. I mean, I was sort of curious. I mean, I've looked up over the past couple of years, just, you get curious about stuff, or some friendos ask us about XPW because we've talked about it a lot on the show. And I've looked up, what he's up to, and he's been relatively active in terms of like having his own podcast or something. But, you listen to for about 10 minutes and you're like, oh yeah, this guy hasn't changed. Like, he's just the same, he is what you think he is. There's no irony there, oh, I've changed my ways and I see the light. There's none of that. So I'm not terribly shocked that he wasn't interviewed. Honestly, the worst bit for me, it's one thing to go through all that. The Messiah getting his thumb cut off because he slept with another man's wife. That's like a story that's told. You can watch that every week on Dateline. That stuff isn't necessarily shy. What really bummed me out the most was Luke Hawx, who's been on a couple episodes now of Dark Side because he's
on the Canyon one,
the Canyon one, and then he was on Heels for a couple episodes, and I know he's wrestled. It's just I've never really known much about the guy, and now I sort of feel like I'd recognize him now. Well, he was a young wrestler back then, and he tells a story about how, and this was the thing in ACW too, is that everybody in the locker room thought you were less of a man if you put your hand up to get a chair shot. So it's always these unprotected chair shots. Well, one week he ends up eating a chair shot, and he instinctually puts his hand up. Well,
that's what they're trained to do.
That's what they're trained to do. So Rob Black in the back gets pissed, and Jerry Lynn goes to Luke and says, "Hey, that guy doesn't know what he's talking about. You did the right thing, And so the next week, they do a spot and he didn't know this was going to happen, but he was handcuffed, and Supreme starts blasting him in the head with the chair. And he says his skull he's pretty sure his skull got fractured.
Yeah, he said he still had like a indentation on his skull.
And that was horrifying. Yeah. Because that dude could have died, like legitimately. Yeah. I mean, I know Vic Grimes could have, any number, like we could have in the crowd. Supreme could have. But like to be so horribly blatant and vindictive, to send Supreme out there, who deserves culpability, he deserves the blame too for doing it.
Definitely.
To go out there and legitimately try to end a guy's career, maybe, I don't know, and just blast him with these chair shots. That to me was the most sickening thing, Yeah. I mean, burn a guy alive. What are you going to do about that? I mean, he's a deathmatch guy. He signed up for that spot. There's going to be risks involved. Try to take a guy's thumb because he slept with your wife. That's just sort of the odd twists of life, I guess. But like, man, this poor dude is just trying to be a wrestler, and and they almost killed him.
Yeah.
Like that to me, oddly, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong here. That to me was like crossing a line.
I think part of it too is we're familiar with a lot of the other tales of XPW.
That's true too. That's totally true.
And that's the first time I heard that story, and the callousness with which Rob Black seemingly treated a lot of his wrestlers. Given what we know about XPW, maybe not necessarily shocking, because it just seemed like he didn't really, at a lot of levels, didn't care. And I guess he cared about the show, but he didn't necessarily care about the talent per se. But to hear Luke talk about that and how much damage that did, and all he was just doing what he was taught to do. He put his hand up to protect himself, and then gets punished for it.
I think that's why it was so egregious to me, is that you sleep with another guy's wife, you don't deserve to get your thumb taken at all.
No.
But you hear about that stuff a lot, right? Like, okay, there's going to be some consequences to that. You got to be a little bit smarter. I don't endorse it, appreciate it, condone it, nothing like that. And I had heard that story before. I've heard it 25 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But like this poor dude was just doing what he's trained to do. He just was trying to be a wrestler.
Yeah.
He was just trying to be a wrestler. And then they send him out there, make him vulnerable, and do the one thing in pro wrestling you're not supposed to do, and that's violate the trust of your opponent.
Yep.
And that, to me, is the most sickening one of them all. I mean, I don't know. Who's to say that brain damage you took isn't worse than having just 4 digits on a hand? So maybe it is actually worse. I don't know. But yeah, that was particularly disgusting to me. At that point, I was oh, God, man, this guy is terrible. So yeah, that it was interesting. It was an interesting look back on the past and to flesh out Messiah's story more, because all I knew is that after the fact he did sort of drift from different. I think he was in CZW. I think he was like one of the CZW Deathmatch champions or something like that, or maybe that was Supreme. Maybe that was somebody else. But I know that he went from to a couple different promotions at the time. And then I guess he had just retired. And relatively recently, I looked him up, and it looks like he does have a very happy sort of suburban home life.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, he was talking about now that, you know, his life is his family. It's his wife, it's his kids. And yeah, he seems to found happiness
yeah,
in that and seemingly walked away from wrestling entirely. So
yeah. So yeah, no, I thought it was a fun trip down memory lane, and a really bizarre trip down memory lane, because I remember, XPW was like, oh, cool. What's this about? It's like, oh, okay. That's interesting. Let's talk about the steroid trial.
Oh, so going back, Messiah was CZW champion in 2002.
Okay.
But just not their deathmatch champion, just heavyweight champion.
Oh, he was actually their champion. That's cool.
Twice.
Okay,
like
wow.
Twice in 2002 and 2004.
What was his last match? Do you have, is it cage match up there? What do you have?
No, I just have the title lineage.
Okay.
I only won it twice in 2002 and again in 2004.
Oh, wow.
That's after 2004, there's not much here. I can see when he stopped. It says here 2014.
Oh, wow. Okay. Oh,
well, he was scheduled to return to CZW in 2014, but then he ended up not doing it.
Ah, okay.
I think prior to that, 2011 was probably when he stopped wrestling.
Oh, wow, that was quite a spell afterwards.
Yeah, so it's about 10 years afterwards.
Yeah, that's crazy.
All stuff
I figured he'd be done by the mid-aughts, but no, that's great.
Yeah, I would think so too. Yeah. I would think so. But I mean, at the time, he was in his early 20s.
He was a young guy. Yeah,
he was a young guy. So even if he retired at 33, you know,
right.
Still a lot of life ahead of him.
Yeah.
Let's talk the steroid trial, because if I remember correctly, when we talked to Evan prior to season 3, he was talking to us about them interviewing Vince, WWE's lawyer in the steroid trial, Jerry McDevitt.
It's pretty nuts to think,
that he would sit down and pretty much tell the story, and I was kind of prepared, given the conversation we had with Evan, to be impressed by Jerry McDevitt. He is a damn impressive dude.
He is. He really is.
Calm. Yeah. He's soft-spoken.
Yeah.
He's highly intelligent.
Yeah.
He's confident without being arrogant.
He's one of those scary lawyers, you know? Like, I've been around just a few, and it's like, oh, man, you could just, when you know the law inside out like that, when you have a mind like that, it's like, dude, you can kind of run this place. You know what I mean? Like, if you know the law, you can do whatever you fucking want. And that's kind of what happened here.
He ran circles around the prosecution. And one thing that this episode illuminated for me, because I wasn't well versed in the case, you know, is that seemingly based on this, the government didn't have much. They pretty much had wrestlers who said, I use steroids. And they had seemingly a coerced statement from Zahorian, the doctor who was selling steroids to the wrestlers, that would link Vince to the distribution of said steroids. But McDevitt saw that they were keeping Zahorian in various prisons and in solitary confinement for 44 days.
Yeah, that was nuts. Prior
to putting Zahorian in front of the grand jury. And then at first he was like, no, I never had a conversation with Vince. So they threw him back in solitary confinement, brought him back out, and pretty much said, hey, you know, we still have some charges that we could file against you. So keep that in mind when you're going out there.
Selling to kids. Selling steroids to kids.
Keep that in mind next time we ask you questions. And that's where the statement about Lincoln Vince to Zahorian came about.
And it was all there in writing too. So it's
Yeah.
like all Devitt had to do is like just go around
And read the statement. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, it was kind of nuts. Like I understand why it was probably difficult to get anybody from the prosecution back then to go on record for the show. But it was kind of striking just how like little they had and really like what their motivation for going after Vince would have been. I mean, was it just, it seemed, I guess you can sort of put the pieces together that it was kind of a PR stunt on behalf of the federal government to say, hey, we're serious about the war on steroids, because it was just sort of a thing over the past couple of years that they made it illegal. But you know, Vince McMahon obviously probably in their eyes an easy target because it's an entertainment medium that's targeted towards kids, that predominantly features these big jack dudes who you know, clearly at least at some point were on the roids.
And then I you know, part of it too is they already had the conviction on Zahorian prior to Vince's trial, and there was wrestlers who testified, or they had already implicated receiving steroids from him. So it's like, okay, we have numerous WWE wrestlers who have either said yes, we've purchased, and I guess therefore implication used steroid from Zahorian, or have been implicated, you know, outside of court. They didn't have to testify. So all they need, I guess, in their eyes, was one connection of Vince saying to Zahorian, get steroids from my wrestlers. And then there's the case. They never got, I mean, based on what we saw, there was never that link made, you know, and then Jerry McDevitt kind of towards the end, they tell the story about how he researched extensively. He wanted to know everything he could about steroids. And so there was one particularly strong steroid that the government says this isn't safe for human consumption. And so, you know, in theory, because of that, it should be like really tightly controlled.
Yeah.
And it ends up that was the steroid that a lot of wrestlers were getting. And so he used that as an example of the FDA not doing their job in terms of saying, hey, this steroid is supposed to be out of circulation. People cannot be. And that didn't happen. Therefore, the regulatory process didn't work as they intended. So essentially, he was implicating the FDA and these wrestlers using steroids,
outlining the hypocrisy of it all for the jury. No, that was very interesting. And again, it's one of those things where it's like, man, this guy, you know, getting Hogan out of testifying against Zahorian, and then finding all that stuff. Like, obviously, he's an incredibly. I mean, the great thing about this episode, too, I know John Pollock outlined this on Twitter. He says, man, you know, they really did do a stellar job condensing the steroid trial, which is a massive thing, down into 44 minutes. I do feel like I would love to see a longer documentary, even like a series on this, because each of the individual steps are fascinating. Yes. You know, and extrapolate each of the story beats into their own hour-long, you know, a series, I think could be really, really fascinating stuff. But, you know, in the meantime, this definitely does a good service to it.
It's just, hearing how McDevitt got Hogan out testifying at the Zahorian trial, you know, he was thinking, well, Zahorian was helping Hogan with some legitimate medical issues. At least that was, you know, on file. So it would violate the patient doctor privilege to have him testify against him. So Hogan got out of testifying. It was interesting seeing Hogan go on Arsenio Hall and lie, and Vince apparently being upset about that. Because Vince just wanted him to go out there and tell the truth. But, you know, from Hogan's perspective, you know, he probably thought, well, my character is predicated on saying your prayers, taking your vitamins, drinking your milk. You know, injecting yourself with steroids isn't on that list.
Doesn't work for me, brother. He was so. I love how he was using his shoot voice on Arsenio Hall too. He was like, "Here's the thing, brother. Did this 3 times, Jack. It was all during rehab. Oh, I needed it all, brother.
I tore my bicep, brother." He was in that phase when he was getting off. Steroids, but he wasn't off. I mean, he was still, you know, by the time he showed up in WCW at WrestleMania 9, he looked completely different.
He literally looks like a different human being. If you look at a picture of Hulk Hogan from 1985 and a picture of him from 1995, he literally looks like a completely different human being. It's nuts. Yeah.
And his appearance in Arsenio Hall was somewhere in between all that. Mm-hmm. So there's a little bit of 85 Hogan there, but also he had slimmed down to like 94 Hogan.
It's funny to listen. Yeah, Bret Hart's passage in his book talks about, he was all sunken in because he was off the roids. I saw him standing there. He was like a shell of a human being. It was that was crazy. What was also kind of crazy was the fact that the general consensus is Hogan's testimony got Vince off. Because Hogan's testimony was the big marquee, feature attraction, and he did not implicate Vince. He says, "Hey, we're gym buddies. We would swap steroids sometimes." Which, oh god, like all the recreations they do of like the parties where people are just injecting, those gross me out. So I know it's out of focus, but it grosses me out because there's like women around and they're like, "Hey, here, put this in your butt."
Well,
it's like, oh.
It's out of focus, at least more of the imagination.
I know. That's what makes it so horrifying.
I know.
But Vince was pissed off that Hogan testified. And then, of course, Hogan takes it and runs with it and says, the interview with one of the PW Torch, one of the podcasts.
Yeah, I think it was PW Torch. Yeah, it was from 2002, where he pretty much took credit for Vince not going to jail.
Yeah, I prevented Vince from going to jail for 17 years. No, it was, I mean, you got to think them getting McDevitt is a huge get, but like within 10 minutes of listening to this guy talk, he's not going to put himself in a situation that he can't explain his way out of, like this dude is thinking 5 steps ahead of any questions you might be asking.
Yep.
It was definitely interesting to hear his point of view.
Even how he managed to get himself. So there's a bit in there where since Hogan was scheduled to testify against Vince or for the prosecution, and McDevitt had represented Hogan in the Zahorian case. Yeah, there was a conflict of interest there, so there was a worry that he might have to recuse himself. And his plan was simple but pretty brilliant. He hired a different lawyer, a former federal prosecutor, represent Vince. He just represented WWE.
Yeah. It's funny because so much of what he did did seem very simplistic. And maybe it's just in the way he explains things. But from, getting Hogan out of testifying against Zahorian, well, it was a doctor-client privilege. Well, he doesn't, that's like legitimate stuff. And, of course, that drove the fella from the reporter. Oh, God, what's his name?
Phil Mushnick?
Yeah, Phil Mushnick. Drove him crazy because he was like, how did he get out of that? It's like, well, the way he explained it is pretty simple and it makes sense, and I could see why he'd be out of it. I really wish, and I know they only had 45 minutes, but one day on the Smash Zone, you and I and Enforcer, we need to watch that Donahue episode.
Yes.
Because I've always wanted to watch that in its entirety and see just how awkward it gets. And when the other reporter, the heftier guy, says something about testimony or it would destroy him, and Meltzer's like, well, no, that's what you told me. And then Vince is basically caught in a lie on TV, and Vince just like rolls his eyes like, oh, this is beneath me. I'm like, why do you put yourself in these situations, Vince? Like, you just end up yelling at everybody. I know. Whenever Vince is in an interview, he just ends up yelling at people.
Yeah, I know. That's all he does. I don't know a whole lot about Meltzer and Vince's relationship.
Yeah.
It seems like back then they talked a lot.
Right? Yeah.
Obviously, that's not the case now, I would think. And so what led to those conversations?
I think we might have saw it. Donahue, yes. It might have been that. It's like, man, I tell you this shit. I give you your scoops. And then you come on here on Donahue, the #1 show in daytime talk or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Donahue was hot shit back in the day.
It was.
And then you freaking call me out. We might have actually seen that happen live, the decimation of their friendship. Yep. And of course, when it all comes back not guilty for Vince, for the WWE also, it just emboldens Vince. And it's like from that point on, he's just insufferable. And he puts that in his Mr. McMahon character a couple of years later. And Stephanie relates. That was an interesting moment, too, when Stephanie went out crying and McDevitt, who really seemed to have a soft spot for her, goes in there. It's like after the prosecution's closing statement, he said, well, watch this. Watch what I'm going to do. And he goes,
he says, I haven't talked yet.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. And McDevitt talks about at the end how it was a bold strategy and ended up working for him. That he didn't call a single witness.
Yeah.
Not a single one.
Yeah.
And he said, hey, in the end, if he was not guilty, was acquitted, and because of the verdict went their way, it seemed like a brilliant strategy. But if it hadn't, well, that's would have been the one thing everybody pointed at as the flawed strategy of the defense. You didn't call any witnesses. How do you expect to win? But if you were able to seemingly easily poke so many holes in the prosecution's case because they haven't made firmly made the most important link.
Yeah.
I mean, they called nails.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. They thought that nails was going to be like a slam dunk right there. And it's like, I love that they bring up, no, this guy, he was covered up the entire time. Like, what? He has no credibility there. And he's a disgruntled former employee. They should have wheeled in the Bret Hart shoot interview from 10 years later.
Yeah.
He was shrieking like a woman. But and then my favorite bit, though, was, and I'm really curious because as soon as I saw it, I was like, that's bullshit. When McDevitt talks about learning about the indictments, him and Vince walk into a restaurant, and on the news, they get it happens there. Vince McMahon and the WWF have been indicted 8 counts or whatever, 9 counts or whatever on conspiracy to distribute steroids. And he's like, and everybody in the restaurant started, Vince. And they're like, you go get him, Vince. And I'm like, that didn't happen. What fucking restaurant is that? Where everybody's like, oh, yeah, go get him, Vince. And the whole place starts cheering.
Is there a restaurant in Titan Towers?
Yeah, right. I know. Exactly. Was this restaurant just like takeout in Vince's office?
Was this around the corner in Stanford from Titan Towers?
Was this WWF New York?
Yeah, I know.
Maybe it would have happened there. And then the last bit when that I totally believe is when McDevitt, they're celebrating afterwards at a bar, and he's like, hey, you could take the neck brace off, and Vince takes it off and starts throwing around. And then the good lawyer he is, McDevitt, says, but then he put it back on. I don't want you to think that he wasn't actually hurt. Get out of here. Yeah. He took that thing off and threw it in the trash, man.
Yeah.
But no, because you could definitely tell when the lawyer started peeking out of the McDevitt stuff. But as far as lawyers go, like JR said, man, he's the guy that you want. I wonder how extensively, if they sort of got that JR clip, maybe while they were filming, maybe I'm assuming maybe if they have questions for JR for like an episode, they add the other episodes in that session, so they don't have to keep on bringing them back. But it would have been a bit more. It could have been interesting. I'm curious what JR bits were on the cutting room floor about the steroid trial, because from his perspective, that could have been very interesting as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting the things they didn't necessarily touch on. The reports that Jerry Jarrett, had Vince been convicted, would have taken over. The plan, that was supposedly implemented. If Vince had been convicted and had to go to jail, how the WWF would have continued or could have continued.
I wonder if that was addressed, because he did say it never once crossed my mind to think about losing. And I wonder if maybe they did ask and it was a non-answer. It was like, we never thought about losing, so there was never a plan really in place.
And also, they didn't really have anybody, with maybe the exception of JR, who was interviewed, who was with the company. When that was happening, that would have been, amongst the leadership.
JR was there in '93, wasn't he?
He was there for WrestleMania 9. But I don't know if at that point he was head of talent relations or anything.
Yeah, right. Because I think that was like his first WrestleMania that he did.
I think so. I don't know if he'd been privy to the conversations about, what are we going to do if Vince goes to jail?
Obviously they weren't, they got McDevitt, but they were going to put Bruce Pritchard there, who has actually talked quite a lot about the atmosphere in terms of the steroid trial, if not the specifics about it, but I mean, I think he's gone into specifics as much as he could on his own podcast, because they obviously cover, Conrad loves talking about the 94, 95 days. And of course that's right in the thick of the steroid trial and right after the steroid trial. So yeah, he has talked quite a bit about it, but it would have been interesting to get, I agree, some other perspectives, or bring Hogan in or whatever. But I mean, Hogan sort of in the podcast interview sort of said, I guess, as much as he could. And honestly, for my money, more McDevitt better. I thought that he was a pretty fascinating character, and to hear him even to this day, sort of the back and forth jousting with the reporters, with the journalists, was also interesting. How some things just don't change. The one guy claiming that men showed up at his mom's house, or at his house rather, his mom was staying at. He was saying that's ridiculous. That he's not important enough to do that. That was still, some philosophies never change, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I mean, also Mushnick was talking about how, he was being investigated by the defense, from his perspective,
and he shared a drink with somebody,
with one of the guys, yeah,
that was interesting. That'd be crazy. But yeah, so I don't know. They haven't said anything about a season 4. I don't think. I'm sure we'd probably get that info, whenever it's approved. I mean, you would think, given the popularity of it, that they would do another one. And Lord knows there's plenty of subjects out there. We should make public. I know we did one specifically for Friendo Club TV. We should make that public. I don't know.
Or we could do a more fleshed out version of it,
Yeah, we could totally do that. Yes, ideas for season 4, because we did that for Friendo Club TV members. Available patreon.com/Steven Larson, or if you're a YouTube channel member, you can just click join. Or of course, if you're a Twitch sub, it might be available there for you. I'm not sure exactly if that's stuck around or not, but certainly on the Patreon, $5 a month, patreon.com/Steven Larson. We only did it a couple months ago. So that's going to do it for our recap of season 3 of Dark Side of the Ring. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We appreciate it. Hopefully have a good weekend. Till next time, we'll talk to you later.
Goodbye.